Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a glorious, blessed weekend. Social distance, hunkering down at home. In Fort Hawthorne, we did pretty well this day. I spent most of my weekend walking around our house like this right here and chasing my little grandkids that are like three. One of my granddaughters was turned 3 over the weekend, and the other grandboy, her cousin, he's about 2.5. And so I spent most of my time chasing them around, making them squeal, which is a pretty good deal. We got a great show for you today. We're going to start with a story about Nancy Pelosi. She essentially says that President Trump has blood on his hands and has been fiddling while America burns, and we'll get into that. And then deep state to the rescue. You know, we've been trying to get out of the deep state, drain the swamp the president has. Is the deep state going to be what actually saves our behinds? We'll explain that in just a moment. And are voters excited by Joe Biden? Do I even have to ask that question? Well, apparently there is an enthusiasm gap, and I'll let you guess which candidate, President Donald Trump or Joe Biden, has the most enthusiastic support, and we'll explain more in just a minute. But we start with none other than Nancy Pelosi, the Wicked Witch of the West out there. Trump's delay on coronavirus response is deadly. We're using the Hill as the source for this. Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Sunday President Trump's delay and denial in responding to the coronavirus pandemic has had deadly consequences for Americans. We're going to play you a video in just a moment, about 1.5 minutes long. She's being interviewed, I believe, by Jake Trapper of CNN. And I want you to hear what she's talking about. Now, keep in mind, this is a woman that pushed back the stimulus package for over a week, tried to put all kind of progressive agenda items in there, things they normally couldn't pass, and held this sucker up for a week, but now is accusing the president. And if you don't know the historical reference, when she talks about fiddling in a little bit in this video, she's talking about Nero, the famous emperor of Rome, supposedly watched while Rome burned, played his fiddle. Let's check it out. Can we play the Pelosi 1 video? I hope so. We have a few technical glitches. There we go. Here we go.
And safe. I know your home district of San Francisco has been particularly hard hit. President Trump is considering relaxing federal guidelines for coronavirus for some of the less affected parts of the country. Do you think he should?
Well, first of all, let me just say how sad it is that even since the president's signing of the bill, the number of deaths reported has doubled from 1,000 to 2,000 in our country. This is such a very, very sad time for us. So we should be taking every precaution. What the president, his denial at the beginning was deadly. His delaying of getting equipment to where it continues, his delay in getting equipment to where it's needed is deadly. And now I think the best thing would be to do is to prevent more loss of life rather than open things up so that, because we just don't know. We have to have testing, testing, testing. That's what we said from the start before we can evaluate what the nature of it is in some of these other regions as well. I don't know what the purpose of that is. I don't know what the scientists are saying to him. I don't know what the scientists said to him. When did the president know about this? And what did he know? What did he know and when did he know it? That's for an after-action review. But as the president fiddles, people are dying. And we just have to take every precaution.
Man, I don't know about you, but to me, that is pretty low. That doesn't get much lower than accusing President Trump. She's literally saying that President Trump has blood on his hands, that he's been just fiddling, playing the fiddle, watching America burn. This from a woman who absolutely knows no shame. And we'll get into some details of that. But I hope even if you don't like President Trump, I hope that that video that I just played infuriates you. I hope you'll go back and look at it and see what kind of leadership, if you want to call it that, the Democratic Party has, because it is sad indeed. And you could watch the extended version of it. Really, Jake Trapper doesn't challenge her really at all. Lets that hang out there. You know, can you imagine? I mean, President Trump gets beat up for all kind of stuff. Can you imagine him saying that Nancy Pelosi has blood on her hands, essentially, that people are dying because of Nancy Pelosi? He would just be tortured by the press. Torched, at least. Ask about her thoughts, talking about Pelosi, on the administration considering relaxing federal guidelines for less affected parts of the country. Pelosi said the U.S. should be taking every precaution. Well, the president is taking every precaution. He's extended, in case you haven't heard this, it just kind of broke last night. President Trump has extended the distance, social distances of basically sheltering at home until April 30th. Now, everybody acts like that the whole Easter Sunday deal was some kind of written in stone, that Trump came out and said, oh, we're going to have everything's going to be great by Easter. He never, ever said that. Let me repeat that again. President Trump never said that everything was going to be hunky-dory by Easter. He said he hoped it would be, and it would be a great sign, symbolism, if it were, and that that we need to get Americans back to work as soon as possible. It doesn't mean Easter Sunday. It's soon as possible. Right now, he's hoping, and let me repeat, he's hoping that it will be by April 30th. There is no guarantee of that. And if the situation gets worse, then he's going to extend it out further. They're literally evaluating this not only on a day-to-day basis, but they're evaluating in 2-week increments, which most people think is the incubation period of the virus. So President Trump, the media is just torturing him I guess I should say, for things he never, ever said. Okay? I mean, it's just ridiculous. He's extended it till April 30th. Now, is it possible it could happen sooner? Sure. Is it likely that it will be later? Probably so. But would you rather him get up there and go, we're all going to die? And we are someday. But Pelosi went on to say, I don't know what the purpose of that is, she said, talking about the president extending it out or saying, you know, we're going to be okay by Easter. I don't know what the purpose of that is, she said, adding that she doesn't know what the scientists are telling Trump. I can tell you, ma'am, what the purpose of it is. It's very simple. It's the word hope. It's like Jesse Jackson said, keep hope alive. He's trying to keep people hopeful, optimistic. Americans thrive on optimism. It also is realistic. If you watch his press conferences, he's being realistic. And I'll give you another example. I was listening to some programs on the way in today, and they're conservative programs, and they were beating up Trump a little bit for some of his tweets over the weekend, where he talked about his ratings. These press conferences were higher than Monday Night Football ratings. They were higher than The Bachelor ratings, and he was being beaten up by some people for saying that. But it's a little bit out of context. Now, do I believe that sometimes the tweets that the president says and does get a bit out of hand from time to time? Sure. But the context of it is he was talking about how ABC, NBC, I'm sorry, we're hearing a little static on the line there. I don't know if Billy Bob, but he was there. Thank you. He was talking about how the networks are talking about blacking out his press conferences, and he was simply saying that he was getting more ratings. In other words, he said the American people are the ones that are voting by watching what we're saying. He wasn't bragging about himself. He was bragging about, if he was bragging at all, and you could make a case that he shouldn't go down that road, and I can hang in there with you on that. But to insinuate that the president was comparing himself directly with some and trivializing his press conferences is not true. He was trying to defend himself and his press conferences with the lying media and them trying to black him out, so to speak. And another thing, I want to get some of these things have just been eating me up inside because I just get so sick of the media, both conservative and mainstream media. That's why you got to tune into shows like JMT, by the way, so you get at least a fair shot. But he's been being hammered for saying that the governors and the states should be more appreciative. But they play that one part of that clip, and Jake Trapper did it quite a bit. That CNN played it like in a loop, and they even talked about how that was going to be used against him in the campaign. But if you listen to the entire clip, when he says that the governors and the states should be more appreciative, he is not talking about himself. He says, I'm talking about the men and women behind me, the experts, the scientists, the directors of FEMA, the doctors, including doctors, they call him Dr. Doom Fauci or how you say his name, the Surgeon General. He's talking about the men and women that are working on the lines with the federal government to try to turn this thing around. He was not talking about the governors need to be appreciative of him at all. So it's just, you could beat him up. There's plenty of things to beat the president up of, but beat him up with facts and not BS. But as for getting back to Nancy Pelosi, let me calm down a minute. People, Miss Pelosi, are dying in the streets of San Francisco, and they have been for quite some time, way before. Look at this picture. This is an actual homeless camp in San Francisco, in her district. And people have been dying on the streets of San Francisco from dodging rat infestations, from dodging typhoid. But long before we had coronavirus, typhus was making a comeback in San Francisco. People are dodging. They got poop maps, for God's sakes, with needles sticking out of them. The one person I don't want to hear about watching the country go to hell in a handbasket while they do nothing is Nancy Pelosi. I just don't want to hear it. But she went on and said, and we have to listen to her, I guess, because she is one of the leaders of the country. She said, as the president fiddles, people are dying. We just have to take every precaution. And this is coming from someone. So she's saying president is like Nero, watching Rome burn, I guess watching the United States burn. This is from someone who held up the stimulus package after this is not getting reported enough. The Senate passed a package and the House held it up. She actually put out a package that had everything in the kitchen sink for progressive movements, agreed to the Senate package. This is the part not being reported. Agreed to the Senate package in principle, went out to San Francisco. Then when it passed the Senate, was supposed to pass the House, came back, flew back, and then put all this garbage in there. And it's just crazy, man. This is a person that is talking about life and talking about lives being lost while she put more funding for abortion clinics. I mean, you talk about knowing no shame to actually sit there and say that President Trump is responsible for death when you are holding up the stimulus package for death. You're abortion, I don't care which side of the issue you're on. It is taking a life. There is really no debate about that anymore. Only debate in political circles. In reality, it is taking a human life. I don't care which side you fall on that. It is taking a human life. To say otherwise means you don't believe in science. You can be pro-abortion, but it is definitely taking a human life. They're even talking about taking human life after the child is born, for God's sakes. Brought to you by the Democratic Party. But she is worried about life. She holds up the stimulus bill to put abortion funding in there and the Green New Deal, for God's sakes. She literally is saying that airlines, now thank God this didn't pass, but some elements of it did, that airlines, before they could go back into business, assuming they ever actually do, of course they're running small shifts now, that they have to have certain fuel efficiency standards. Now, we could argue whether that's reasonable or not down the line, but when people's lives are on the stake, does it really matter? And diversity issues. She literally was talking about, and she held this stimulus package up, and I covered some of this last week. You can go check out our podcast. There's several ways to do that. You go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. We now have our YouTube channel back up and operating. You can also catch us on America's Voice News, and I want to make a quick announcement about that. First of all, you can download America's Voice News, free app on both Android and iPhone. We're streaming across Fire Stick, Roku, Apple TV. We're now on Dish Network, channel 219. This is the announcement I want to make about it. Our show typically has been going at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time across those networks. You may see some changes in that. I'll try to keep you as up to date as possible. But America's Voice News is now, because their audience is growing, they're moving shows around and testing them to see which time slot is the best. And they're talking about moving my time slot to a late night type thing, which might be actually good. So we'll keep you posted as best we can about those changes. But they're also archiving our shows on their website. But Nancy, back to the story at hand. Nancy Pelosi was literally holding money up for diversity issues that board of directors would have to prove they had a diverse board before they could get any money. It is absolutely ludicrous. And for her to say that Donald Trump is causing death is just, man, I'm going to have to calm. Don't get me started. I don't want to be a high-risk group because of Nancy Pelosi. The speaker also criticized Trump for his remarks last week at the signing of the stimulus bill when he said, "Just think of how life can change where you go. 20 to 20 days ago, everything is perfect." In other words, before this thing hit us, everything was good. We were on an economic boom. And then one day we get hit with this thing that nobody ever heard of before. And that's true. Our country, the numbers that are coming out right now, their home sales were up. Orders for large order for big business was up. Everything was up, man. It was booming before this happened. And hopefully the president can, if this thing, let me put it this way. If and when we turn this thing around, I do believe the president is by far the best person to get the economy going again. And I have every hope that he will. But Pelosi said, no, everything wasn't great. In other words, before the virus now, she's saying everything wasn't great. We had nearly 500 cases and 17 deaths already. But of course we did. But if it weren't for President Trump shutting the border down, which you, by the way, said was xenophobic, they just don't, they think you're really stupid and that you don't really pay attention. And heck, for some people, they may be right. She said at 20 deaths because we weren't prepared. We now have 2,000 deaths and 100,000 cases. So let me just ask you, Miss Pelosi, how long have you been up there? How long has your political career been in Washington, D.C.? Well, I got some answers for you right here. She's been in Congress for 31 years. President Donald Trump has been up there for 3.5 at most. She's been there 31 years. And she has represented San Francisco, California's 12th District in Congress. She's led the House. She's been the Speaker of the House on a couple different occasions now for a total of 16 years and previously served as the Democratic whip. So not only has she been in Congress for 31 years, but she's been in leadership for a couple of decades, basically. And she's going to talk about the president not being prepared. Where have you been? It just infuriates me. Let me just say this too. And I'm not trying to dump on the states too much, But the states are the center of our emergency response. Now, you could argue whether or not they should be, but that's the system that Donald Trump inherited. Our states have used to be independent. By the Constitution, the states are supposed to act as independent units and come together for the greater good based on the Constitution and provide, and the Constitution, the federal government essentially provides for the national defense and make sure that your constitutional rights aren't abridged by other states. That's basically the role of the federal government. Pretty much everything else is supposed to be left to the states. That's how it was designed. Obviously, that's not how it is right now. But states are supposed to be prepared. You know, Wyoming doesn't need to prepare for a hurricane. Florida does. New York maybe does. Florida doesn't need to prepare for an earthquake. California does. So everything is a little bit different. It's never supposed to be one size fits all. And I broke this story on my my Facebook page over the weekend, John Martin Talks. If you hadn't checked it out, go like, share it with others. But just to show you how crazy the Democrats are getting, the mayor of New Orleans came out with a statement over the weekend, criticized, because New Orleans now, and Louisiana, but New Orleans especially, is becoming a hot spot. But she came out with a statement criticizing President Trump for not ordering that Mardi Gras be shut down. Now, keep in mind, that was in the middle of February. She's complaining that Donald Trump didn't shut it down. On top of that, I don't know if you've seen, I should have put up the videos, but after Mardi Gras, New Orleans celebrated St. Patrick's Day in a big way. And people were bumping and grinding and doing everything else. But to think, can you imagine if President Trump had come out and shut down Mardi Gras before they even had any real cases out there? What would have been said about? They would have called him a fascist dictator. But now they're the ones clamoring for him to be a fascist dictator. But she said, we really do want, this is back to Pelosi, we really want to work in a unifying way to get the job done here, but we cannot continue to make these underestimates of what is actually happening here. Who's doing that? Who's actually underestimating what happened? It's certainly not Trump and his team. You need to watch the news conference, Nancy. Donald Trump is definitely not underestimating. He's trying to give us hope in the middle of some of the dark days that many of us have ever faced. It's not the darkest we've ever faced as a nation, but it's certainly the darkest that the snowflakes have ever faced. Pelosi stressed that the focus should be on moving forward rather than on what could or should have been done. Wow. This is a person who knows no shame. Go back and look at when the coronavirus was first popping on the world scene and we had the first case or two here in the United States. And did you remember what was happening in our country at that time? This gal right here was pushing the impeachment of Donald Trump. They were trying Donald Trump in the Senate, knowing full well that he was not going to be convicted, that he was going to be exonerated. They knew that the charges against him were bogus, BS, trumped up charges, and they went forward anyway. And you talk about a colossal waste of time and money. What could we do with that time and money if we could use it right now? So if anybody failed to prepare us for what could be happening, it's this chick right here, man. She added, evaluating what scientists told Trump about the virus and when he was informed can be part of the after-action review. You heard that in the tape towards the end there. And ladies and gentlemen, I try to be seriously entertaining, and I want to be serious and hopefully entertaining because we got to laugh sometimes. And we can't just be all gloom and doom. But let me translate what she just said. Let me read this part again, and I want to give you the translation of what this means. And this for you, if you're thinking about voting for the Democrats and voting for Joe Biden, or you're not going to get out and defeat these people, this is what you need to hear. Evaluating what scientists told Trump about the virus and when he was informed can be part of an after-action review. What she's talking about is impeaching the president again. That's what let's don't mince words. She's talking about an after-action review. In other words, investigating President Donald Trump's response. So instead of coming, she says coming together, but she's threatening the president at the very time we need to be unified in this country. She is threatening the president with more ridiculous BS. And she's talking about, make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm telling you for a fact, she's talking about impeaching the president. The Democrats are going to try to steal this election, by the way, and we got to be vigilant on this. Don't be distracted by the virus. We need to make plans and everything. But this gal, led by her and Chucky Schumer and the Democratic Party, they're going to try to make sure that we don't get to go to the polls in regular fashion. They're going to try to do a mail-out only ballot and combining that with internet voting. If that happens, and I'm not talking about absentee voting, I'm talking about where they mail a ballot to every registered voter, whether they request one or not, with a return stamp envelope, very little, if any, oversight, and internet voting. If that happens, I don't know about the coronavirus, but that's the end of our republic, and that's what they're. So I'm going to keep reminding you of that because we cannot let that happen. All right, we're going to move on to a Politico article, and this is what about Donald Trump and the challenge and the deep state. It says Trump's April challenge, leaning into the deep state to quell a raging crisis. So basically what they're trying to say is that the deep state that Donald Trump has been fighting, in other words, the swamp, is actually going to save us all. Boy, that gives you some great hope right there, right? Everyone in the White House owns or wants to own a piece of the administration's corona response. Well, to use the Democrat phrase, if true, and everybody wants to be on board with it, well, something must be going right, because nobody jumps on the sinking ship, do they? Vice President Mike Pence is officially running the coronavirus task force. Thank God for Mike Pence. One of the best decisions President Trump ever made was nominating or naming him his vice president. Senior advisor Jared Kushner has propped up his own operation focused on increasing the testing capacity in the U.S. for foregoing partnerships with private industries and business executives and tracking down desperately needed medical supplies. Jared Kushner, who is Donald Trump's son-in-law, married to Ivanka, he apparently is doing a great job working with businesses on all this. I mean, the man is tremendously successful. You know, he was a multi-billionaire before he ever even met Ivanka Trump. So, you know, he's a winner as well. Health officials are sparring with economic aides over the White House's internal deliberations about when and how to reopen parts of the U.S. economy. Like, that's a bad thing. It goes back to what I said earlier. Donald Trump is trying to give us hope. That's what he's trying to give us. And he realizes that if our economy goes in the tank, and we go back and look at the deaths that happened in the Great Depression, poverty kills too. And the countries that are dealing with coronavirus the best are the wealthy nations. The poorest are dealing with it the worst. So there is a direct connection. But President Donald Trump himself is fielding calls from governors, Republican lawmakers, business executives, and former aides as he crowdsources, interesting they would use that term, his decision making the best path forward to fight the virus. President Trump is using his business sense in how to approach this whole thing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, contrary to what the mainstream media, doesn't make him heartless. It makes him shrewd. The reason, or one of the reasons why we elected President Donald Trump is because he's not a politician. He has a business mind. He's a problem solver. He's the right man at the right place at the right time. And so this, a lot of the criticism, this is what they don't get about you that support Donald Trump. A lot of the criticisms they're making of him are the very things that we think are the positives. They don't understand MAGA people. Inside the White House, staffers are experiencing the classic Trump team of rivals. They make this sound like a criticism. Approach to governing, in which a variety of factions and personalities vie for the president's attention and the last word on policy deliberations. It works. That's a winning strategy. It works even in medicine and everything else. A team of rivals. What you don't want is a bunch of yes men in there. And the president has been accused of that quite a few times, as having yes men because he fires people. That is not the way he operates. That's the way the press portrays him. What President Trump does is a classic business model, problem-solving model. And my dad, who was a very prominent political figure, told me this years ago. He said, never be afraid to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. Listen to everything they say, take it all in, formulate it, make your best decision, and put it in your own perspective and your own words and go forward with it. That's what he told me was the key to leadership. And it is. And as far as the yes men, Donald Trump has no issue with people bringing him bad news. He doesn't. What he is about is that once the decision is made, we go forward. I'll hear everything you got to say. But if you're on the team, once you actually tell me what you want and we formulate the opinion and I make my stand and say this is what we're going to do, then that's what we're going to do. And what President Trump has had is people yammering to the press, people undercutting him, and I wouldn't blame him for firing everybody that did that. And this whole thing about firing the pandemic team, Obama fired everybody, pandemic or not. When he took over for President Bush, he put out a letter telling everybody that was any type of appointee to pack your bags and head for the house. That when he came in, you were gone. He fired everyone. And Donald Trump fired a bunch of people long before this virus ever hit because he wanted his own people in there. Can anyone dispute that the people that stand behind him right now are not the best of the best? I mean, even the liberals have to agree with that. Trump has long preferred this approach, talking about this team of rivals, to his operation. But this time, the competing voices offer wildly different prescriptions for fighting the pandemic when the stakes could not be higher for both the health of Americans and Trump politically. So, I mean, if it's a winning strategy, it's a winning strategy. Does it mean that every decision they make is going to be right? No. This is a work in progress, ladies and gentlemen. We've never had to deal with this, certainly not within over 100 years, and the country was a lot less complicated back during the Spanish flu. You know, it's a different situation. And the world wasn't literally, intermixed the way it is now. If Trump sends Americans back, and no, I'm not talking about races, so, we get all that crazy. I'm talking about the ability to go anywhere at any time at a moment's notice. It's not about race. It's about geography. If Trump sends Americans back to work, it's amazing how you have to qualify that these days, right? If Trump sends Americans back to work and allows businesses to open their doors too soon and the virus spreads even further, he would extend Americans' self-quarantine by weeks or even months. And that's likely true. But at some point, I'm not saying this point, but at some point we're going to have to take a risk. We can't wait till the virus is totally gone because it may never actually happen. There are the people that think this thing is going to return. If it works typical of these types of viruses, it's going to return. We may be dealing with this for years to come. But if we build immunities, then we'll be better off. So we're going to have these viruses come from time to time. It may change, and it already has. That the president. Here's the thing: they don't want to give President Trump any credit. He's been right all along. Borders actually do matter, and now state borders even matter. It's just nuts, man. But nobody wants to give him credit that he's been right from the beginning. Every country in the world right now is trying to protect their borders. It's nuts. But if the economy remains stalled, leaving millions more people to lose their jobs and countless businesses to go bankrupt, then Trump will have overseen an even deeper downturn that devastates his reelection process. And boy, do they hope that actually happens. Here's the thing. Donald Trump and his team have some tough decisions to make. We have some tough decisions to make as a nation, as people. Are we going to boldly go? Or are we going to be scared? You remember our nation was founded by people with bold visions who embraced the personal responsibility. They didn't relish death, but they weren't paralyzed by it. So we have to ask ourselves, a nation, are we still that hardy group of people or not? Do we want to be both ignorant and free? Because we want what never was and never will be. So we're going to have to make some decisions. But President Trump, without a doubt, has some tough decisions to make. Can you picture Joe Biden making these decisions? Really? I got a little video here that I'm going to play you. It's just kind of a little montage of just a few of the crazy gaffes that Joe Biden made. And you tell me after watching this that Joe is your man? Check it out.
Excuse me, I got to get this right.
And why should the voters believe that you can win the national election?
I was a Democratic caucus. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that?
No man has a right to raise a hand to a woman in anger. And so we have to just change the culture, period, and keep punching at it and punching at it and punching at it.
If you want to check my shape on it, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do.
It is important that Iowa and Nevada have spoken, but look.
Get your words straight, Jack.
I'm Jill Biden's husband, and I work for Cedric Richmond. Are you joking? Granddaughters not only love their dads, their grandpops, they always like them, and that's the great thing. Thank you, baby.
That's a bit creepy.
I want you to meet Finnegan.
Good. That's good enough right there. I mean, this dude, you want to put him in charge? Really? Really? You can seriously look at yourself in the mirror and go, you can hate Trump all you want, but can you look in the mirror and say Joe is the man to lead us right now? I don't see. Amid the confusing environment, the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, officially begins his job today. And can't be fast enough. I'm very excited about Mr. Meadows being up there with the president. Said Chris Whipple, author of The Gatekeepers, How the White House Chiefs of Staff Define Every Presidency. He said Meadows, talking about the new chief of staff, Congressman Meadows, former congressman from North Carolina, is just walking into a perfect storm. It's almost a White House that was designed to fail from day one. Based on what? What do you base that on? Fail at what? President Trump's White House, the thing that upsets the progressives the most is that he's winning while they're whining. They keep throwing crap at him over and over and over, and the White House, led by President Trump, is stronger than ever, and they just don't get it. So fail from day one. Your strategy of ridiculous BS has failed from day one, but you keep implying it. Keep going. Now, back to what Mr. Whipple said. Now you've got a crisis meeting a president who ran against the whole idea of government. That is true. And who thinks the federal bureaucracy is a deep state out to get him. Now he has to be able to mobilize that deep state to save us all. Well, if the deep state was all that in a bag of chips, you know, where was all this preparedness? I mean, think about it. We came off in 2008, I believe, of the swine flu, whatever virus that killed tens of thousands of Americans, infected like over almost 1 million. I don't remember. There's a lot of people. And you don't think we should have used that as being prepared? Forget whether he fired the pandemics. Shouldn't they have prepared with masks and ventilators and everything else? I mean, New York, for instance, and I'm not wishing them ill. I'm praying for New Yorkers. Contrary to Nancy Pelosi, I do pray for people, and I pray that they be lifted from this every day. But the fact is that New York has been the epicenter and the threat for what? Nuclear fallout, biological war, planes crashing off. I mean, New York State and New York City should be the most prepared city on earth for every single thing. But yet they weren't. You know, I'm not necessarily knocking people, but you can't lay all that on Donald Trump. So if the deep state is all that in a bag of chips, and, you know, what was it? Cuomo, you know, he keeps bragging about being a member of Obama's cabinet. Well, he was HUD. Did he have them prepared? Apparently not. I don't know. It's just but let me give you a prediction here. President Trump, they talking about the deep state. If President Trump wins re-election, he's going to use, and I don't mean this negatively, he's going to use this coronavirus to dismantle the deep state. Unlike what this writer is trying to say, President Trump is going to show us that the states need to be prepared individually. We need to bring back American-made manufacturing. We need to isolate China and make sure that all of our critical needs are made right here in the good old USA. And that's what's going to happen if President Trump gets reelected. If Biden were to become president, I know one thing, man, we would be in deep doo-doo. Said Judd Deary, Deputy White House Press Secretary, President Trump and his entire administration are focused on leading the whole of government response to slow the spread of COVID-19, expand testing capacities, and expedite vaccine development. The goal is for America to be healthy, prosperous, and again open for business. And that's what we're all working toward. Amen. And the congregation said amen. Check my time now. We're doing okay. Said one Republican close to the White House, President Trump, and I want you to listen to this very closely because I agree with this paragraph 100%. President Trump runs a merit-based staff structure. He's always going to go with the hot hand or who he perceives to be demonstrating the most value in any given topic. What usually ends up happening is that one staffer or group of staffers become the smartest voices in the room on a topic. As Trump sees that playing out, he sticks with them for the remainder of the crisis. And that, snowflakes, is why people like me voted for DJT in 2016 and are anxiously awaiting our chance in 2020. He is a winner, baby. All right, we're going to move on to this last story from ABC News, and it is about Biden and Trump. They go head to head, hopefully at some point, right? A poll, Biden consolidates support. There are polls consistently that show the Democrat, in this case Biden, winning. I don't know if I believe them or not, but we'll get into it. Biden consolidates support, but trails badly in enthusiasm. In other words, and this is according to ABC News, in other words, his support among his own people is not very enthusiastic, and Trump's is through the roof. Former Vice President Joe Biden has emerged as Democrats' top choice for the presidential nomination in a new ABC News Washington Post poll. So it's got to be true, right? But with only bare majority support within his own party and a massive enthusiasm gap in November matchup against the president, Donald Trump. So I wonder why people aren't enthusiastic for Joe Biden. Could it be his way he has presented himself? You know, he's supposed to do these daily press briefings himself from his bunker in his basement of his home. And here's like the first one he did. Check this out.
I'm glad the president has finally activated the National Guard. Now we need the armed forces and the National Guard to help with hospital capacity, supplies, and logistics. We need to activate the Reserve Corps of doctors and nurses and beef up the number of responders dealing with these crush of cases. And in addition to that, we have to make sure that we are in a position that we are. Well, let me go to the second thing.
Courtesy of the New York Post there. I mean, Biden going like, hey, come on, man. Oh, I've said enough about it. I mean, if you've watched any of Biden's interviews since this crisis started, and you still going to put that man in charge. That guy right there. Joe Biden? Really? Seriously? Hate Trump all you want, but please, for God's sake, be honest with yourself. You cannot be ready to support that dude. Indeed, strong enthusiasm for Biden among his supporters at just 24% is the lowest on record for a Democratic presidential candidate in 20 years of ABC Post polls. More than twice as many Trump supporters are highly enthusiastic about him, 53%. And I would say that number is probably short. Is anyone really, truly excited about Joe Biden? Trump's still strong rating on the economy is another challenge for Biden. So is this among Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents who prefer Senator Bernie Sanders for the nomination. 15% say they, check this out, I want to slow down. This is talking about Bernie Sanders supporters. 15% of his supporters, according to this poll, say they'd back Trump over Biden in the fall. Well, they're probably smarter than some of them look, right? If true, Biden through. In the nomination contest, 51% of lean Democrats now preferred Biden versus 42% for Sanders. So he's beating the Sanders people out. That's a vast 34-point gain for Biden since mid-February, with other candidates having left the race and endorsed him. Sanders gained 10 percentage points. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why they jumped on Biden, it's not because they're anti-socialism. No, the Democratic Party is more socialist than ever. Look at what they tried to put in the stimulus package bill that Nancy Pelosi was holding up. That's all you really need to know about how socialist they are. They actually, whether it's the right choice or not, they believe that Biden has a better chance of beating Trump. That's it. It's all about that. And old bloated Joe, you know, his old body floating along, he was dead on arrival. They're grabbing a hold of him, man. They're grabbing a hold of him. But keep in mind, Democrats have an advantage no matter what, because they start out with California, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York right off the bat. It doesn't matter who's running. They do. And so they're enthusiastic. I don't know. I got a picture, I think, of Biden supporters we've been playing. I want to close out with this because we're pretty much out of time. Trump and Biden are even in a trust to handle the coronavirus outbreak, 45 to 43%. So let me just say this one more time. We'll close with this short video. If you are for Joe Biden, then I think you should be forced to watch this video 24/7 on a loop. Check it out.
That turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
If there's any enthusiasm for that guy at all, I got to question your sanity. TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, is apparently real. Hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.